Sky Views, Trump's men are a relief for the UK. Alistair Bunkall, defense correspondent. This was the week the Americans came to Europe. Rex Tillerson, James Mattis and Mike Pence, Secretary of State, Defense Secretary and Vice President. The charm offensive began in Brussels via Bonn and on to Munich. Every foreign delegation wanted face time with them. It's been 5 days of first meetings. For most European ministers, this has been their first experience of the Trump administration. The UK's Defence Secretary, Fallon, was effusive. His bilateral with Mr Mattis at NATO was the best initial meeting I've had, after Hagel and Carter, he told us. Mr Fallon's team believe they can work with his US counterpart, they feel he gets it and see him as a straight-talking soldier. The Foreign Secretary was equally impressed with his blind date. Boris Johnson and Mr Tillerson met in Bonn on the fringes of the G20 Foreign Ministers Summit. I'm told Mr Tillerson was read in, well briefed and particularly strong on Yemen and the Middle East. It's still early days for such a big brief, but the message is, he is saying the right things. But openly, he's actually not saying much at all. Amid the incessant noise of President Trump's continuous tweeting and press conferences, it has gone slightly unnoticed that Mr Tillerson hasn't actually spoken in public yet. Well, almost unnoticed. The traveling press, State Department correspondents, are tearing their hair out. Tillerson just doesn't seem interested in the media, one journalist complained to me in Germany. Unlike his predecessor John Kerry, Mr Tillerson didn't indulge in the traditional press huddle on the plane over, and there were no interviews or briefings after his bilaterals in Bonn. In desperation, the press pack started calling and texting British government officials for any snippet they could get. It is an interesting twist to an administration that tends to speak before thinking. Mr Tillerson is not a politician, he is a chief executive, and by all first-hand accounts he's approaching his new job in the same way he did his last. After 5 days listening to on-camera interviews and receiving background briefings, my honest report is that the British side is buoyant and encouraged by what they heard. Relief, perhaps? Or just plain ignorance? I think more of the former. But before we get carried away, it is worth remembering that first impressions can be deceiving. The British government is wondering how influential Mr Mattis and Mr Tillerson are, and whether they have the president's ear. However great the individual relationships between British ministers and their American counterparts, it won't matter a jot if Mr. Trump continues to do his own thing. Sky Views is a series of comment pieces by Sky News editors and correspondents, published every morning.